stepper whom I would call my friend. His name is Jamie Mccoskey. His ID number is 999053. We've known each other for over 14 years. He's 49, I'm 35. To me, my partner, and my siblings, he's family. Jamie is an innocent. He ended someone's life and he's paying the ultimate price for that. He accepts that, even though he's no longer the man who got locked up some 20 years ago. Many years ago, Jamie sustained a back injury while at the county jail. He slipped and fell on a wet floor. Over the years, his back problems have gotten worse and worse, and he can no longer walk on his own. Since he cannot use a walker in his cell, it's too small for that, he often gets around on all fours. A number of years ago, he developed gout in his knees. When I came to visit him 5 years ago, one of his knees was the size of a cantaloupe. It was purple and swollen. Now, both of his knees are raw, purple, and swollen. One of them has a bulbous growth on it that he tells me bursts open sometimes. Still, the guards force him to get on his knees. He is 6'7", and that is the only way he can be kept through this life. He could not be considered a serious threat, seeing the condition he's in. He often forsakes his ragtime and even his showers because of his knees. When I visit him, I ask to see his knees. He's very reluctant because he knows the effects it has on him. It is so bad that it turns my stomach and makes me cringe. These men were sentenced to death, not to be tortured. I implore you to make some changes to the conditions of death row. Jamie's story is one of many. Men are dropping their appeals because they can no longer bear the isolation and the suffering. Men are going insane, ripping their own eyes out, smearing themselves with feces, and becoming suicidal. I ask of you that you show these men some humanity. They are human beings despite their often horrendous deeds. There needs to be an end to this suffering. Thank you. I'd like to give you something if I may.
I realize that in Texas, like other states, there's a lot of supermaxes and solitary, ad seg, and here in Texas there's 8,000 to 9,000 people locked up in isolation. But I'd like to address death row today. I write and visit men on death row, and I hear really horrific tales about the isolation and about the mental illnesses that it's caused. I have had friends that used to write to me just disappear into a shell of their former self, and they have their own alternate reality now. One of them is Cesar Fierro, who was once a bright young man, who is now actually widely recognized as being innocent, even by the DA that prosecuted him in El Paso 30 years ago. And now Cesar looks like an old man, filthy, dirty, unshaven, unkempt, that I would see under a freeway bridge in Houston. And he's just one of many people. Probably some of you saw last month's Texas Monthly story on Andre Thomas. He's the one that took out one of his eyes and then more recently ate the other eye, so he's totally blind now. And he's actually just before the psych unit now. My question to y'all today is, why can every single man on death row be locked behind a solid steel door and not allowed any social interaction, no religious service, no work program, no arts and crafts or piddling, and no television? Every man lives in solitary, and this has been going on over 13 years. Solitary, even if they have a perfect disciplinary record. Solitary, even if they don't have contraband, even if they don't get into fights, even if they don't attack guards or trade postage stamps for magazines. They're in solitary. Half of it, and there's no reason for this, the escape attempt was 15 years ago. Half the people on death row today weren't even there 15 years ago. Also, just as a cost issue, solitary doubles to triples the cost of incarceration, up to maybe $60,000 a year per inmate. And even wardens who once thought it was a good idea are questioning its use. I recommend that this board investigate the practice of solitary confinement for every death row prisoner and based on these findings, issue a report. And in preparing a report on this, I suggest that you look at the American Bar Association's standards for criminal justice and treatment of prisoners that they published, and also the recommendations made by the Special Rapporteur on Torture to his report to the UN General Assembly in September of 11.
Are you not finishing your time, sir?
Okay.
Can you wrap up for us?
Yeah, I just recommend that everybody visit Death Row and look into this. As one of the men wrote me, said, forget about abolishing the death penalty, get somebody to abolish the torture. We were sentenced to death, not torture. And I have
Are there any
comments.
comments from the board? Any questions on it? Okay, no, very good. Thank you, ma'am. Hold on, we'll let her come get.
I'm here to talk about solitary confinement because I think it's an aberration. It's abhorrent that we do that to people. And I don't know if the board's waiting to hear back from some federal court or the Supreme Court before you do anything, but I would ask that you go visit some of these people. I know the board is, has an incredible responsibility. You've got 200,000 people whose lives you're really controlling. The solitary confinement, I know it's been more in the news and there have been hearings on it, but it drives people insane. Cover themselves with feces. They become more violent because they are so oppressed and so they have time to ruminate. I myself visit occasionally some people who are in administrative segregation, who it does numbers on people's brains. It damages brains. And there was a program this week, Brian Williams and Ted Koppel talking about children who are in solitary confinement and does permanent damage to their brains. I know Texas has children who have as adults and got brain damage, permanent psychosis. I mean, it's a terrible thing to do to people if it's not necessary. They strike out many prisoners smear feces on cell walls or themselves. Others take destroying their body waste and blood, flashing into projectiles. I mean, this creates more violence. There are more attacks by inmates on guards in EdSeg because they have all day to think about it and plan and how to, because they have nothing else to occupy their minds. I'd also like to ask why, I've tried to find, looking on the internet, whether there's some rules over the prisons, whether there's some guidelines, and I found Texas Commission on Jail Standards, and a lot of the things that men are put in a more severe environment are minor infractions. But the minor infractions in this Texas Commission on Jail Standards said that they'd be limited to counseling, verbal and written remand, disciplinary separation for a period not to exceed 15 days. I don't know why we do this to people. At some point, this is going to be unconstitutional. And Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, in his dissenting opinion in Brown versus Plata, called this ruling perhaps the most radical injunction issued by a court. And that has to do...
Your time is up. Would you could wrap up for us?
Okay. And it has to do with the radical notion that prisoners are human beings entitled to the most basic human rights ever given, even while incarcerated.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
All right.